They fined us $475 for having a temporary military decal on my wife's truck, gave us 72 hours to remove it, and mailed the notice certified like it was a summons. 3 days later, the HOA president called the cops on her while I was still at work in downtown Spokane. Welcome to HOA Society. My name's Eli Carver. I'm a civil engineer who designs drainage systems for a living, which is probably why I can't stand when authority leaks. If you're new here, grab a chair, settle in, subscribe if you like stories where the rulebook meets its maker. And hey, tell me where you're watching from. I always picture someone out there sitting on their porch, wondering if it's just their neighborhood that's gone nuts. That Friday started like any other. I was reviewing culvert specs when my phone lit up with a text from my wife, Kayla. They're here. HOA board plus police. Attached was a photo of 3 officers at our driveway, one hand resting on a sidearm, another on a clipboard. Her military ID badge glinted against her denim jacket, the same one she wore home from deployment last year. She looked calm, but the caption underneath hit me like cold steel. He said, "I forged this." I left the office without shutting my computer. When I reached our cul-de-sac, the HOA president, Martha Kane, was still there. Khaki slacks, floral scarf, clipboard thicker than a legal pad. She was pointing at the decal on Kayla's truck, voice sharp enough to slice paper. "Rules are rules," she snapped. "You can't use military service as a free pass." Kayla folded her arms. "You're out of line, ma'am." I stepped between them, adrenaline balanced by training. "You called the police over a sticker?" Martha turned, chin high. "Fraudulent representation of military status is a federal offense. We're protecting the community." That word, community, always sounds noble right before someone misuses it. The ofs. Fighter looked uneasy. He glanced at Kayla's badge, scanned it, then gave me a faint nod. "Everything checks out," he said. Martha's face tightened like concrete curing. It should have ended there, but she wasn't done. "We'll review this with counsel," she hissed, stepping off our property. Her shoes crunched on the gravel, an expensive sound. When the patrol cars rolled off, the silence felt heavy. Kayla exhaled. "They think they can scare us," she said. She was right. What she didn't know yet was that I'd already started noticing inconsistencies. Assessment hikes with no supermajority votes, maintenance contracts awarded to board relatives. The engineer in me hates sloppy math. The husband in me hates bullies. I spent that night with a pot of black coffee and a spreadsheet of HOA budgets going back 6 years. Line by line, I matched payment dates against the association's annual meeting minutes. Something didn't add up. A $20,800 landscaping expense recurred every March, paid to Green Lake Services LLC. But the state registry showed that LLC dissolved in 2019. Knowledge nugget number 1. Under most state statutes, Washington's RCW 64.38 included, an HOA must maintain active vendor registration and disclose conflicts of interest. Failing either can void contracts and trigger audits. By midnight, my desk was a paper battlefield. Kayla walked in wearing one of my old flannel shirts, eyes soft but tired. "Eli, you're spiraling again." I looked at her, remembering the day she flew out to Kandahar, how I promised to keep this place safe for her return. "They came onto our property," I said. "That's trespass, and if they're mishandling funds, that's theft from every neighbor here." She set a mug beside me. "Then do it by the book." So I did. Over the next week, I requested every document allowed under RCW 64.38-045, financials, contracts, violation logs. They stonewalled me with a one-line email. "Board materials are private." That line was my spark. Transparency isn't optional under statute, it's mandatory. I printed the email, slipped it into a binder marked Exhibit A. Each new obstruction would earn its own tab. By mid-April, the retaliation began. We received 3 new violation notices in 5 days. Mailbox post chipped, repair within 48 hours or $50 fine. Trash bin visible before 6 p.m., $75 fine. Unauthorized flag bracket, remove immediately. I took time-stamped photos of every alleged infraction. Our mailbox was intact. The trash bin was placed at 5:53 p.m. The flag bracket was installed by the developer when the home was built. At the next board meeting, I asked politely to read a statement. Martha smiled without warmth. "Non-agenda comments are limited to 2 minutes," she said. I timed it exactly. 2 minutes fine. I laid the certified letters on the podium, the green USPS slips flapping like receipts of war. These fines were issued without due inspection or proper citation authority. I'll need the inspection logs for each. Silence spread across the room. One neighbor, Bill Donnelly, an old machinist with nicotine-stained fingers, muttered, "They've been doing that to me too." That was the moment the tide whispered it could turn. Outside afterward, Bill caught my elbow. "I kept my old paperwork," he said. "They fined me $300 for a shed they later claimed was grandfathered." He handed me a manila folder, edges worn. Inside were receipts, photos, and a meeting minute showing Martha voting on her own appeal 3 years ago. Selective enforcement. Conflict of interest. 2 legal phrases that smell like victory. That night, I drew a map of every property fined in the last 12 months. 91% belonged to newer homeowners, people without voting history or who'd missed annual meetings. Patterns don't lie. People do. I called an attorney the next morning. Lydia Price, municipal law specialist, known for her ink-stained cuffs and thermos coffee. She listened quietly, clicking her pen. "First," she said, "keep documenting. Second, never confront without a witness. Third, if they breach fiduciary duty, we'll bring the Department of Financial Institutions into it." I asked, "How long?" "Give me 30 days. I'll file the preliminary requests myself." 30 days. I could live with that. But HOAs, when cornered, don't retreat. They escalate. The first sign was subtle. A white sedan I didn't recognize parked across from our driveway at 7:42 a.m., engine idling. The driver, gray hair, sunglasses, clipboard, pretended to read something. By noon, an anonymous post appeared on the community Facebook group. "Veteran couple exploiting HOA exemptions. Investigation pending." It had 5 likes, 3 from current board members. Kayla saw it before I did. "They're smearing us," she said, jaw tight. "This isn't about decals anymore." She was right. They'd turned our quiet street into a petty battlefield. Still, I stayed calm. Engineers measure before they act. I bought a dash cam, set it to loop every 48 hours, and angled it toward the mailbox. I added a motion sensor camera on the porch, not hidden, just visible enough to remind them we were documenting everything. By week's end, 3 citations arrived in one envelope. The last line read, "Continued non-compliance may result in referral to Enforcement Council." I scanned it, tagged the metadata, and forwarded it to Lydia. Her reply came fast. "Classic intimidation. RCW 64.38-1085 forbids harassment by enforcement action. Keep the originals. Will escalate through proper channels." That Friday, I walked the cul-de-sac, counting the rulebook violations Martha never enforced. Christmas lights still up in April, an unapproved shed behind number 14, a driveway oil stain that looked months old. I photographed them discreetly, uploaded everything to a cloud folder labeled Comparative Enforcement Log. The next HOA meeting felt like walking into a courtroom. Martha opened with a forced smile. "We value all feedback," she said. "However, spreading misinformation on social media harms our community's reputation." I raised my hand. "Would you like to clarify which misinformation, or shall we review invoices for Green Lake Services LLC together?" A few neighbors glanced up sharply. One gasped. The board treasurer whispered something to Martha. "Mr. Carver," she said, tapping her pen, "that company performs landscaping services under contract." "Except," I said, pulling a printed record from my binder, "the state dissolved it in 2019. Unless you've discovered resurrection powers, that's an issue." A murmur rippled through the audience. That's when the second engagement moment came naturally. "Folks," I said, scanning the room, "if you've ever been bullied by an HOA, leave a note on record, here or online, so others know they're not alone. And if you serve on a board but try to do right, leave your message for the bad apples who make you look corrupt." The meeting ended in chaos. Martha adjourned abruptly. The treasurer refused eye contact. Bill slapped my shoulder on the way out. "They won't like that," he said with a wheezy chuckle. "I'm counting on it." The next morning, Lydia called. "Your request rattled them. We just got a response from their attorney, a Robert Flynn. They claimed those contracts were assigned to a successor entity, Lakeview Grounds LLC. Only problem? No registration found under that name? So, a ghost company? More like laundering legitimacy, she said. I'm drafting subpoenas, but keep collecting internal communications if you can. I didn't have internal emails, yet, but I had neighbors. By late May, 4 of them shared copies of violation letters identical to ours, even down to the phrasing. Each had one subtle difference. The fine amounts were inconsistent. For one family, a flag violation cost $50. For another, $125. Selective enforcement again. I logged it all. Knowledge nugget number 2. In HOA law, selective enforcement means applying rules inconsistently. Once a board ignores a rule for one member, it often forfeits the right to enforce it against another until uniform standards are restored. By now, the board was running scared. Martha issued a security memo, banning all recording devices at meetings. She cited privacy concerns. Lydia laughed when I told her, public body rules don't apply, but they still must allow reasonable recording if notice is given. State law's one-party consent, and you've already notified them. Record next time. I did. At the June meeting, my phone lay flat on the table, screen dark but audio rolling. The moment Martha said, "We'll fine him until he sells," I knew we had something. The retaliation escalated further. A wellness check requested anonymously, a code inspection from the county that mysteriously aligned with our HOA complaints, even a false tip to animal control about a dangerous dog we didn't own. Kayla started double-locking the doors. At 2 a.m. one night, I heard gravel crunch outside. I opened the curtain to see 2 silhouettes near the mailbox. I stepped onto the porch with my phone light on and spoke clearly. "You're trespassing. Leave now." They scattered, but one dropped a clipboard, stamped Board Access Log. I snapped a photo before calling the sheriff. When the deputy arrived, I explained calmly, "All I need is a report number." He looked around. "You sure you want to push this? These HOA things get messy." "Messy's fine," I said. "Illegal isn't." That's when fear started to mix with determination. I wasn't fighting for just our property anymore. It was about everyone who'd ever been cornered by petty power. Lydia met me 2 days later. Ate her at a diner off Route 2. She spread out the files like a general over a battle map. "You've built a case," she said. "But to flip it, we'll need leverage, not just evidence." "What kind of leverage?" "Something they don't know you control." That night, I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through the county assessor's database, cross-checking parcel IDs. Most of the HOA's common area lots were deeded directly to Cedar Hollow Association, Inc., except one, a 0.23-acre utility easement along the lakefront, listed as a private parcel, tax delinquent for 3 years. And its registered owner? Green Lake Services, LLC, the dead company. I felt my pulse climb. If I acquired that lien, the HOA's Lake Access Road, its prized amenity, would run across a parcel under my control. Reversal number 1 had just revealed itself, glowing like a fuse line. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse with a thermos of black coffee and the quiet certainty that this was the hinge moment. The clerk at the tax office wore bifocals and a floral scarf. "Parcel 1/18-07-233?" I asked. She typed, squinted at the screen, and said, 3 years delinquent, no payments since 2022. Public auctions in 12 days. 12 days, I repeated, letting the numbers settle like a countdown in my chest. Is assignment permitted before auction? She shrugged. If you pay the lien balance and file the notice of claim, yes, about $481.62. Less than $500. That was all it took to turn their fortress into sand. I paid on the spot, filed the paperwork, and walked out with a stamped receipt, the most powerful piece of paper I'd ever held. The metal door closed behind me with a hydraulic hiss that felt like punctuation. When I told Lydia, she smiled for the first time since we'd met. That, Mr. Carver, is what we call lawful checkmate. Keep it quiet until the meeting. At home, I tucked the deed packet into a fireproof box behind the furnace. Kayla watched me with raised brows. You're buying land now? Technically a lien, but says it's the land their Lake Road crosses. She exhaled. You really think this will stop them? It'll make them listen. While Lydia prepared the legal filings, I focused on building our narrative. Photos, timestamps, violation logs, everything organized into color-coded binders. My background in engineering finally had a higher calling, structuring chaos into evidence. Knowledge. Nugget number 3. Under most state recording acts, a perfected lien assignment filed with the county auditor takes precedence over unrecorded claims, even by an HOA, if executed in good faith and for consideration. The next HOA newsletter dropped 3 days later, printed on glossy paper. Security update. Residents reminded to comply with signage and decal policies to maintain community safety. A jab at us, thinly veiled. I scanned it, labeled it Exhibit H, Intimidation via Publication. Bill stopped by that afternoon carrying his thermos. Heard they're talking about revoking lake access, he said, claiming insurance risk. I smiled faintly. Then they're going to have to talk to the new landowner first. He blinked. You? Technically, yes, but not yet. It stays between us. He grinned, showing tobacco stains. Damn, Eli, that's colder than January mud. As days passed, the board grew bolder, unaware of the fuse burning beneath them. Martha issued a special assessment notice for security upgrades, $325 per household, due in 15 days. I calculated quickly. 142 homes times $325 equals $46,150. And there'd been no vote, no notice period, no quorum. Fines masquerading as protection money. That night I sat on the porch, laptop open, the lake wind smelling of pine and gasoline. Kayla joined me, 2 mugs in hand. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. You look like you're waiting for something. I am. 12 days is now 5. She nodded slowly. You ever think about why this matters so much? Mr. Carver, said a clipped voice. This is Robert Flynn. The association demands immediate relinquishment of that lien. You're interfering with community operations. Then pay the delinquency and redeem it, I said. You have until the statutory deadline. That's how liens work. He hesitated, unprepared for calm. You'll regret this, I smiled. I'm an engineer, Mr. Flynn. Regrets for people who guess at load limits. After the call, I wrote everything down in my incident log. Time, date, duration, witness. Kayla overheard. My folders were becoming a living organism, each labeled spine another vertebra in a skeleton of truth. That week, Lydia submitted a formal complaint to the State Office of Consumer Protection. She copied the county assessor, the Department of Licensing, and, most satisfying of all, the HOA's own insurer. Knowledge nugget number 4. Most HOA fidelity and director's liability policies contain a clause voiding coverage if the board knowingly acts outside governing documents or statutory authority. The insurer must investigate even a credible claim. By midweek, Martha's tone changed. She invited me to a constructive dialogue at the community hall. I agreed, but brought a witness. Bill came along, smelling faintly of diesel and coffee. Martha waited with 2 other board members, nervous smiles plastered on. Let's be reasonable, she said. You've made your point. If we rescind the decal fine and waive your citations, can we consider the matter settled? I leaned back. It's not about us anymore. It's about everyone you fined illegally. One of the board members, Tom, shifted uncomfortably. We were following precedent. Precedent, I said, that violated your own bylaws. No annual audit since 2018, no open voting tallies, and board members voting on their own conflicts. Silence. The sound of rain against the windows filled the gap. Martha T. Ride the soft angle. Eli, think about the neighborhood's image. We all want peace. I want accountability, I said quietly. Peace comes after. On the way out, Bill muttered, You just poked a hornet's nest. Good, I said. We'll see who stings themselves first. The following weekend, the HOA released a statement claiming I'd seized the property unlawfully. They even distributed flyers with my photo, implying possible criminal activity. That crossed the line. Kayla's hands trembled when she saw it. Eli, this is harassment, she said. I know, I said, loading the evidence folder. And every copy they handed out adds one more count of defamation. The retaliation ramped into a frenzy. unscheduled inspections, citation stickers on our door, a Facebook rumor about weapons stored in the garage. Through it all, I stayed methodical, stacking dates, witnesses, photos, reports. But even soldiers tire. One night, around 1 a.m., Kayla woke from a nightmare. "What if they try to force entry again?" she whispered. I held her close, hearing the wind hiss through the siding. "Then they'll meet the sheriff before they meet me." That line steadied us both. Lydia called the next morning. "They're unraveling. The insurer opened an internal review. Claims of unapproved spending, board conflicts. The auditor wants full records within 10 business days." "That's the countdown," I said. She nodded. "Prepare your presentation. The next open meeting is your set piece. Bring everything." Over the following days, I built a storyboard in PowerPoint like I was presenting to a project committee. Clean slides, concise evidence, color-coded highlights. The title slide read simply, Cedar Hollow HOA, Compliance Property Review, July 17, 2025. Kayla ironed her uniform shirt that night. "You're sure about this?" "Absolutely," I said. "They wanted a confrontation. Now they'll get transparency." I stared at the reflection of porch light on my coffee. Because when my dad died, he left this house to us with one sentence in his will. Keep it safe. Keep it fair. He meant more than property. He meant people. That quiet exchange carried me through the next week. On the eve of the HOA's special budget meeting, I prepared my reveal kit, deed receipt, county payment confirmation, parcel map overlay. I even printed the GIS image showing the HOA's private road cutting straight through parcel 118-07-233. I sealed it in a red folder labeled, "To be opened when provoked." Late that night, Kayla came in from the garage holding a small American flag folded neatly. "They can't find me for this one," she said softly. "I'll bring it to the meeting." The day of the confrontation dawned humid and gray. The board gathered inside the community hall, mahogany table, fluorescent lights, coffee in styrofoam cups. Martha presided like a judge before sentencing. Before we began, she leaned toward me with a saccharine smile. "You know, Eli, if you'd just followed the rules, we wouldn't be here." I met her gaze. "Funny, you keep breaking the ones you wrote." She rapped the gavel. "Meeting called to order. First agenda item, security assessment adoption." Lydia whispered, "Let them vote. Then we strike." They rushed the motion through. 3 ayes, 1 abstention, 0 discussion. I waited until Martha signed the resolution. Then I stood, sliding the red folder onto the table. "You just approved funding for an access road you don't own." Confusion flickered across her face. "Excuse me?" I opened the map. This stretch here, parcel 118-07-233, was under a dissolved company, unpaid taxes for 3 years. I acquired the lien last week, which means, until redemption, you'll need my written consent to cross it. Gasps erupted. Bill nearly spit out his coffee. Martha's voice trembled. "That's absurd." Lydia stepped forward, calm as marble. "It's lawful, recorded at 2:17 p.m. last Thursday, Spokane County Auditor's Office. You can verify." The treasurer muttered, "She's bluffing." I slid the stamped receipt across the table. The metal clip clinked against the wood, a sound I'll never forget. The meeting dissolved into shouting. One neighbor yelled, "He owns the road?" Another shouted, "Then we paid for what?" I stood quietly, letting the realization sink in. The first reversal had landed. Outside, the sky cracked open with rain. Kayla unfurled her small flag and smiled. "That's one storm down," she said. The next would come from within. Before leaving, I turned to the camera by the hall door. "For anyone watching this later," I said evenly, "know that law doesn't bend to fear. It bends to facts." And somewhere behind the noise, I felt something shift. Not victory yet, but gravity, reversing direction. As I walked home through the drizzle, I wondered aloud, how far should an HOA control what's on your porch, your truck, your lawn? Where's the line between order and ownership? By the next morning, the storm had a name, Emergency Board Session. They posted it at 6:18 a.m., claiming unauthorized interference with common property. Their lawyer, Flynn, drafted a cease and desist letter so fast the toner was still warm when it hit my mailbox. Lydia read it over eggs and coffee at our kitchen table. "Typical saber rattling," she said, thumbing through the pages. "They threaten injunction, but without a recorded easement, they can't compel access. You're on firm ground, literally." Still, Martha doubled down. Patrol trucks blocked our driveway for safety review, and volunteers patrolled the lake path like sentries. The absurdity of it all would have been funny if it hadn't been so invasive. I walked down to the water one evening just to clear my head. The lake was glass flat, the HOA's private dock creaking in rhythm with the breeze. My phone buzzed, unknown number. I answered anyway. I could feel momentum tilting our way. Still, a thought nagged me as I watched the porch light flicker over the file boxes stacked in the truck bed. When power loses control, it either reforms or retaliates one last time. The next morning, I found a fresh violation taped to the front door. "Unauthorized signage. Remove immediately or $150 fine." The sign was a small notice I'd printed quoting state statute on owner rights. I laughed out loud. They just fined me for citing the law. Bill stopped by later, shaking his head. "You ready for tomorrow?" "As ready as gravity before a fall," I said. He grinned. "Make sure someone records it just in case." I pointed at the GoPro clipped to my briefcase. "Already charged." That night, while Kayla slept, I sat by the window watching the lights reflect on the wet pavement. I rehearsed what I'd say, measured, lawful, surgical. No anger, no gloating, just truth landing like an engineer's stamp on a blueprint. Tomorrow the board would learn the difference between governance and tyranny. And I couldn't help thinking aloud, how much authority should a handful of neighbors really have over your home? What keeps community service from turning into self-service? The rain answered softly on the glass, like applause before the curtain rises. By the time I reached the community hall, the parking lot was already half full. You could feel the tension humming in the air, the kind that makes even gravel crunch quieter underfoot. Kayla walked beside me, chin high, her military ID clipped in plain view. The GoPro blinked red on my briefcase. Bill stood near the entrance with his thermos, offering a nod that meant, whatever happens, I saw it too. Inside, the board sat like a tribunal, Martha in her signature scarf, Tom beside her shuffling papers, and two new faces from the security committee. About 40 residents filled the fold-in chairs, whispering. Martha tapped the microphone. "Tonight's meeting will address misinformation being spread about our board's operations. Mr. Carver, since you requested to speak, you'll have 5 minutes." I stepped to the podium, set my binder down with a heavy thud, and began. 5 minutes will be enough. Behind me, the GoPro's red light blinked once. Recording, per notice given. "First," I said, "I've documented 42 separate violation notices issued this year without inspection reports. I've requested those logs 3 times, denied each time. Second, Green Lake Services LLC, the company receiving $2,800 annually, ceased to exist 6 years ago. Third, Parcel 11807 to 233, the Lake Access Road, is now legally controlled by me until redeemed. And finally, your insurer has confirmed an open investigation into board conduct." The room buzzed like an electrical panel ready to blow. Martha tried to interrupt. "This is a smear." I raised a hand calmly. "No, this is a ledger of facts. And facts don't smear, they reveal." One of the neighbors stood. "Is that true about the road?" I nodded. "Yes, the county auditor's record is public." Another voice. "Then why did we pay for repairs last month?" The treasurer went pale. Martha gripped her gavel. "Mr. Carver, your behavior borders on harassment." I met her eyes. "You called the police on my wife for a decal. Harassment has already been defined." Gasps, a few claps, the sound of a community waking up. Suddenly, a man in the back raised his phone. "I'm live streaming this," he said. "People deserve to know." I glanced at Lydia, who stood quietly near the exit. She gave a slight nod, permission granted. Then Martha made her final mistake. "Security," she said. "Please remove him." That's when the deputy sheriff stepped forward from the wall. I hadn't even seen him come in, broad-shouldered, calm. "Ma'am," he said, "recording in a public HOA meeting is permitted when notice is given. He's within his rights." The room erupted in murmurs. Martha's face drained of color. It was that precise moment, the hinge where control passed from intimidation to accountability, that felt almost cinematic. The gavel slipped from her fingers, striking the table with a hollow clack. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Still, power doesn't collapse quietly. 2 days later, anonymous letters appeared in mailboxes claiming I was under investigation for property interference. Kayla found one tucked under our wiper blade. Her hand shook when she handed it to me. "When does it stop?" "Soon," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Over the next week, the harassment reached its crescendo. A bogus code violation for unregistered structure, our garden shed, built in 2004. Another for improper flag placement. Even a call to Child Protective Services, claiming we left our minor child unsupervised. We don't have kids. That one crossed into cruelty. I filed each incident with the sheriff, attached time-stamped footage, and copied Lydia. Her reply came 2 words long. Perfect record. But I wasn't made of steel. One night, after finding our trash bin tipped over and our fence gate unlatched, I stood in the rain staring at the mess, heart pounding. "They're trying to break us," I whispered. Kayla came out, wrapped in a blanket. "Then don't let them," she said simply. She was my anchor, the only steady point left when the current tried to pull me under. By mid-August, the insurer's audit hit the board like a wrecking ball. The notice was public. Policy review pending. Allegations of misconduct and conflict of interest. Martha's carefully curated reputation began to unravel thread by thread. Still, she tried one last gambit, a special motion to suspend member privileges for anyone disrupting governance. It was laughable, but dangerous. If passed, it could block my access to records. Lydia and I prepared for it like a courtroom showdown. I rehear, said statements, cross-referenced statutes, even timed my pauses. "Stay calm," she reminded me. "They'll overreach again. They always do." That night, I found myself talking to the empty living room, practicing lines like an actor before opening night. "We don't fear rules," I said to the shadows. "We fear rulers who forget they're bound by them." I smiled at how it sounded, maybe too polished. But truth, when spoken clearly, doesn't need polish. When dawn came, the neighborhood was oddly quiet. No patrols, no flyers. Just dew on lawns and the faint smell of wet cedar. The calm before the hearing. And I remember thinking, as I poured coffee into my travel mug, if they can fine me for breathing, they can fine anyone. What would you do if your HOA treated you like a suspect instead of a neighbor? The special hearing was scheduled for 6 p.m. sharp, but by 5:30 the hall was already overflowing. Folding chairs had spilled into the hallway, voices echoing off the cinder block walls. Someone had set up a live stream on Facebook. I could see the red live icon blinking on a tripod near the back. Kayla and I took our seats in the 3rd row. She rested a hand on my forearm, steadying me like she used to before I presented at city review boards. "Stay surgical," she whispered. Martha entered last, flanked by Flynn the attorney, his briefcase shiny and overcompensating. The board sat, gavel ready. She began with a forced brightness. "Tonight's motion addresses disruptions caused by certain residents who've spread misleading information about association governance." "Name them," someone called. She hesitated. "Mr. and Mrs. Carver." You could feel 40 sets of eyes shift toward us. I stood slowly, unbuttoning my jacket, binder in hand. "You're alleging misconduct," I said, "so please define it. Is requesting financial transparency misconduct? Is citing statute misconduct? Or is owning the land your road crosses misconduct?" A smattering of chuckles rippled through the room. The screen light from my laptop flickered across the deed on my desk, and I realized this wasn't just about land. It was about reclaiming agency 1 square foot at a time. Negotiations began in a fluorescent-lit conference room downtown, the kind that smells faintly of toner and old carpet. Lydia sat to my right, sleeves rolled up, her ink-stained cuffs now a sort of battle flag. Across from us, Martha, her attorney Flynn, and 2 board members who looked like they'd aged 10 years in a week. Flynn opened first. "Mr. Carver, the board acknowledges certain procedural errors. However, the association cannot operate under the current impasse regarding parcel access. We're here to find a resolution." Lydia leaned back. We have one. Full transparency reforms in exchange for release of the lien. Martha stiffened. That's extortion. No, I said, voice even. It's restoration. You broke the system. We're offering a way to fix it. Flynn adjusted his tie. What specific reforms? Lydia slid a printed draft across the table. Board term limits. 2 consecutive years max. Mandatory annual audits published online. A transparent voting process with independent oversight. Fee rollback to pre-2022 levels. And creation of an ethics committee elected by homeowners, not appointed. Martha's eyes darted across the page. Impossible. We'd lose authority. I met her gaze. Exactly. There was a long silence. The only sound was the soft whir of the HVAC and the distant click of someone's pen. Flynn cleared his throat. If we agree in principle, will you release the lien? When reforms are ratified and filed with the county, I said. Not before. Lydia added, we'll also need written confirmation of dropped violations against the Carvers and other residents affected by selective enforcement. Flynn sighed, knowing they were cornered. We'll present it to the board. When? They left. Lydia smiled faintly. You played that perfectly. Gave them a ladder out of the hole. That was never about burying them, I said. Just teaching them what gravity feels like. The following week, the special meeting was held to ratify reforms. I didn't attend inside. I stood outside by the steps, listening through the open windows. The murmur of votes, the shuffle of papers, then applause. Real, not staged. Inside, the motion passed by a homeowner majority. 87-12. Visual beat number 2 happened at that exact moment. A rain-beaded microphone catching the hall's fluorescent light as residents lined up to sign the new charter. One by one, they wrote their names, reclaiming what was theirs all along. 2 nights later, local news caught the story. Veteran couples fight spurs HOA reform in Cedar Hollow. A 3-minute segment showing Kayla holding her folded flag, me beside her, both of us looking equal parts tired and proud. The comments section exploded. Veterans, homeowners, even a few self-proclaimed reformed HOA presidents thanking us for standing firm. Still, I didn't celebrate until the final document arrived, a signed community reform agreement stamped by the county. Term limits, audits, open voting, ethics oversight, exactly as written. That evening I sat with Bill on his porch. He handed me a beer and laughed his wheezy laugh. Never thought I'd see the day Martha Kane apologized in public. She didn't say sorry, I said. He chuckled. She didn't have to. The signature was louder. We sat there in companionable quiet, watching the porch lights flicker on one by one down the street. The neighborhood sounded different, less brittle, more alive. But change, real change, needed closure. 2 days later, I called Martha. She answered warily. Yes? I'm recording with notice, I said. The lien is being released tomorrow morning. The reform's official. Congratulations on leading the transition. Flynn leaned into his microphone. Mr. Carver, you've interfered with HOA operations by restricting lake access. I opened the binder to a page marked in yellow. Correction. I lawfully filed a lien assignment under RCW 84.64.082. The association may redeem at any time by paying the delinquency, $481.62 plus interest. You've had 33 days. Lydia, seated behind me, whispered, Good. Martha's jaw flexed. You think owning a sliver of dirt gives you authority here? Not authority, I said quietly. Leverage. A collective inhale swept the room. Then the door opened. A man in a county inspector badge stepped in, rain still dripping from his jacket. Evening, he said. I'm here on behalf of the insurer's compliance review. I was told this board meeting was public? Martha blinked. Yes, but we didn't schedule any inspection. He held up a clipboard. Random audit, ma'am. Reviewing property maintenance invoices and access rights. Need to confirm parcel ownership before liability renewal. You could have heard a pen drop. He set the clipboard on the table, adjusted his glasses, and read aloud. Parcel 118-07-2233. Tax lien held by Elijah Carver as of July 2nd, recorded August 5th. Is that correct? I raised my hand slightly. It is. The inspector nodded. Then until redemption or reassignment, the HOA must obtain written consent for access or risk uninsured exposure. It was like watching dominoes fall in real time. Martha's face flushed crimson. Tom looked at his shoes. The crowd murmured. Flynn stood, voice shaking. We'll contest that record. The inspector tapped the paper. You're free to, but the county recognizes it. Visual beat number 1 unfolded right there. The stamped deed lying on the podium under harsh fluorescent light, water droplets from the inspector's jacket dotting its corner. I looked around the room and spoke, not to the board, but to the neighbors. You all deserve clarity. You pay dues, you maintain homes, you show up. You shouldn't have to fear retaliation for asking where your money goes. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling. Martha slammed the gavel. Order! This meeting is adjourned. But the noise drowned her out. The inspector signed his log, shook my hand, and left. Outside, under the drizzle, Bill clapped me on the back. That was something, Eli. You just flipped the table. Not yet, I said. The second reversal's the one that sticks. Over the next week, the fallout was spectacular. The insurer suspended the board's policy pending review. 2 members resigned quietly. Martha issued a letter blaming administrative oversights. But by then, the neighborhood group chat was a wildfire. Screenshots of old invoices, mismatched signatures, duplicate payments. Everyone contributed. I stayed silent. Silence had become my best weapon. One night, Lydia called. They've reached out to negotiate, she said. Flynn wants to discuss a settlement. Not money, I said. Reform. She smiled through the phone. Knew you'd say that. Let's draft the terms. For the first time in months, I felt a different kind of adrenaline, the kind that comes after surviving a storm and realizing you still have a roof. Kayla poured us 2 glasses of wine. You did it, she said. Not yet, I replied. Now we rebuild. I stared out the window at the cul-de-sac, quiet again except for the chirp of sprinklers and the soft glow of porch lights. The same place that once felt hostile now looked almost peaceful. I thought of all the people who'd been fined, bullied, silenced. If they'd used half this energy on community gardens instead of control, I muttered, we'd have a paradise. Then, to the invisible viewers I knew would hear this someday, I said softly, what would you do if your HOA President used rules to hide corruption? Would you fight from inside or buy the ground beneath them? There was a pause, then something I didn't expect, a sigh. You were right, Mr. Carver. We forgot why we volunteered in the first place. Then remember, I said. That's all that matters. When I hung up, Kayla walked in holding the small, folded flag again. You going to the meeting tonight? Just to listen, I said. No podium this time. As we stepped outside, the street smelled of wet pavement and cut grass, the kind of smell that says home when it used to say battlefield. At the meeting, the newly elected chair read out the reforms. Applause filled the room, steady, unforced. Afterward, a few neighbors came up to thank me. One woman, eyes red from tears, said, You made us brave. I shook my head. No, you made yourselves brave. I just reminded you of the blueprint. That night, back home, I sat at my desk, the deed packet now stamped, released. I placed it next to the first violation notice, the one about Kayla's decal, and smiled. 2 pieces of paper, both ordinary on their own, together telling the story of how order can turn to oppression and back again. Then I turned to the camera on my laptop, recording a short reflection for the next upload. If you've ever faced an HOA that forgot who it serves, I said quietly, leave your story below, and tell me, when authority goes too far, do you fight to dismantle it or rebuild it better? The comments I knew would write the next chapter. The next morning, the sun finally came out after a week of Washington rain. I walked to the county recorder's office with the release papers tucked under my arm. The clerk recognized me instantly. The famous HOA guy, she said with a grin. You here to close the loop? Exactly, I said, sliding the notarized form across the counter. The metallic thunk of her stamp echoed through the room, a clean sound, final and satisfying. That afternoon, a new sign went up by the lake. Public access, maintained under Community Oversight Charter. It was plain, aluminum, reflective in the light. No one owned it, yet everyone did. Kayla stood beside me, sunglasses pushing her hair back. "That little piece of metal probably means more than the flag in our garage," she said. "Different battles," I replied. "Same idea." That night, the board hosted its first reformed meeting under the new charter. Martha wasn't there. She'd resigned formally, citing health reasons. The new chair, Tom, the same man who once voted against me, looked nervous but genuine. "We're rebuilding trust," he said into the mic, "and tonight we begin with transparency." They projected the annual budget on a screen for everyone to see. For the first time, neighbors leaned forward not to argue, but to understand. Lydia joined us in the back row, sipping coffee from her ever-present thermos. "You did it," she whispered. "2 reversals exactly, just like we planned." I smiled. "No, we did it, and now it's theirs." She tapped her notebook. "The state ombudsman's using your case as a model for community reform guidelines. That's rare." Somewhere in that moment, the fatigue finally hit. The kind that comes when the adrenaline drains and all that's left is the weight of quiet victory. Outside, kids rode bikes under the new streetlights. The lake shimmered orange with sunset. Bill waved from across the street, shouting, "They're planting trees next week, Eli. Real ones, not those plastic HOA ones." I laughed, a sound that felt lighter than air. Later, back home, I sat on the porch with Kayla. The cicadas were loud. The air smelled like cedar and cooling asphalt. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Think they'll keep it this way?" "They will," I said, "because they saw what happens when power forgets purpose." For a while, we just listened to the evening, the sound of a neighborhood breathing again. Then quietly I added, "I'm thinking of starting something, maybe a small fund for residents in other neighborhoods who get trapped like we did. Call it the Fairground Trust." Kayla smiled. "I like that. What's the motto?" "Keep it safe. Keep it fair." My dad's words. She nodded, eyes glinting in the porch light. A week later, local news aired a follow-up. Cedar Hollow adopts landmark HOA reform agreement. Insurer issues compliance credit for transparency measures. It played during the evening broadcast, just before weather. My phone buzzed nonstop, neighbors sending screenshots, reporters asking for comment. I declined all interviews. The story didn't need a hero. It needed to live on its own legs. So instead, I wrote a short statement for the HOA Society channel and pinned it beneath the final video. If you believe we fought the right way, and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend. Subscribe so future stories reach you first. And if you know someone facing the same fight, share this. That part's on us. I paused before hitting upload, looking once more at the reflection in the screen. Lines on my face, dark circles, but calm eyes, the kind of calm you earn. Then I clicked post. Visual beat number 3 closed the story. Me walking down to the lake at dawn, dropping the first folded copy of the Fairground Trust Charter into a small waterproof case, setting it beneath the new oak sapling by the water's edge. The camera panned up to the rippling light over the lake, and I said softly, "When power forgets, it's temporary. Remind it who built the ground it stands on." What changed after was simple. The HOA adopted public audit summaries every quarter. Insurance rates dropped by 11% community-wide. Martha was fined $3,200 for improper contracting and barred from serving on any HOA board for 5 years. The neighborhood started a scholarship in her mother's name, for irony's sake maybe, but also for grace. And for the first time, the annual meeting ended with applause instead of arguments. I closed my laptop, stepped onto the porch, and watched the sunrise wash the street gold. Somewhere, another neighborhood was probably about to start the same fight. I smiled and murmured, "Next case."